What you are witnessing here is the high-pressure spray application of a plural component polyurethane foam. Two products, isocyanate and a resin, in equal volumetric parts of 1:1, are being mixed inside the spray gun. The 1:1 ratio foam sprays under its own dynamic pressure, out of the gun and onto the substrate. Heat from within the mixture causes the blowing agent within the system to expand. This causes the plastic to rise, create cells before setting in place. The mix, reaction, rise, tack free, and set all happens in under 10 seconds. The chemistry is 100% solids. That means all of A and all of B are used to make the final product, which we call C. C is the final product that you're paying for, the in-place polyurethane cellular foam plastic that is adhered to the substrate and taking a perfect negative of the base profile. The rise, set nature of spray foam means that it presses into the substrate as well as corners, cracks, holes, and different material joints. It is this rising of approximately 25 times the liquid mass along with the trapped blowing agent which makes spray polyurethane foam the absolute perfect building material and insulation. Hello everybody, Mike with Spray Jones coming to you with part 3 in our 5-part series on Let's Learn Spray Foam. In this video, we are going to go over the most pivotal point that the next 2 videos will make the most sense to you if you grasp what I'm about to say in this video. It might be a tiny little bit lengthier than I'd like, but we've got some really detailed information to go over about how is the spray foam installed and why is it installed that way. And then part 4 we'll get into doing the details, but the details will make sense to you when you understand what I'm about to say here. So let's get into, in layman's terms, why the spray foam insulation is installed the way that it is. Closed cell and open cell foam are nearly identical for most of their process. The difference between open cell and closed is that open cell foam, a water-blown foam, is generally going to be installed to fill the cavity or just fill, shaved off, flush, and then whether a secondary product for vapor barrier or needs to be installed, it will, and then drywall goes up. It's not generally detailed at low thicknesses and left as a standalone unit. It's usually going to be placed in at an overfill because this is a spray-in-place alternative to fiberglass insulation. As a result, it's built up very, very thick, and it is usually in wall cavities shaved off flush with the studs, whereas closed cell foam is going to be detailed and placed where you want it to go. It's usually going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 inches thick, depending on what you need because of the potency of the blowing agent that's in it. Therefore, it's going to be layered in lifts, usually 2 inches at a time due to the chemistry that's involved, and it's much more detail-oriented to install. Whereas open cell foam, it's quicker in most cases to install it because you're just building up mass and shaving off the excess. We're going to concentrate the majority of this video on closed cell since it is more complicated and it is more versatile in all of the different types of situations and building solutions that it can provide. In a nutshell, what is going on in our trailer is that we have a drum of A and a drum of B. The A drum is the hardener, the B is the blend. The B product is determining density, type of product, whether it's open cell, closed cell, that's how we change it. They both use the same hardener, but where you switch out is in the B product, whether you have open cell foam or closed cell foam. And then if you're going to be buying a closed cell foam, what density do you have? Do you have a product that has been chemistry and designed to be 2 pounds per cubic foot, or is the product going to be 3 or 4? You're not going to see many 3s or 4s. 3s are going to be a roofing product, 4 is going to be a panel product. For the majority of the time, 99% of the time, you choosing closed cell spray foam, you're getting a 2-pound density closed cell foam. These products, the A and the B, are mixed 1:1 ratio by volume. So volumetrically, the same amount of A and the same amount of B meet. When they do, they start to make the final product, which I say we call C, right? The final product is that which you are paying for. So how it is transferred is this. You have a drum of A, a drum of B. It's transferred out of the drum through a hose into the back of your proportioning machine. That is where it is going to be pressurized to anywhere between as little as 850, 900 psi, all the way up to 1500. Open cell foam needs a little bit more pressure a lot of times to mix it properly. Therefore, it's going to be sprayed out at 1400, 1500. Closed cell foam, and as little as, I've seen it as little as 850, but usually we're sitting around 1,000 pounds all the way up to 1200. So it's pressurized, then it's heated. This is very critical. We're going to come back to this later as to why things are warmed up. They're warmed up to speed the mix and to help the actual polymerization and catalyzation of the product, speed up the reaction. It is then going to travel through this heater, out of this heater, under pressure, into a heated insulated line, because we don't want to cool it down. We've just warmed it up. So if we spread it out through 200-300 feet of hose, twin hoses, by the way, it's still separate at this time, right? Because we don't want to have mixed product in the machine because it would form foam in our machine. So it's kept A and B separate all through the machine, all the way through this heated hose to a plural component spray gun that again is separate. So when the trigger is pulled, what ends up happening is a mixing chamber aligns the ports. A mixes with B, and under the 1,000 pounds of pressure, or 1,500, the two products mix by hitting each other, swirling around inside that gun, and then under their own dynamic force and pressure, as the chemical reaction is beginning to take place, they spray out and onto the substrate. Now, because it's warmed up and heated, that means that it's now going to atomize. It's not going to be a cold, solid jet stream like a fire hose. Instead, you're going to get an atomized spray like you'd see out of a paint gun, right? So the mixing chamber is allowing those two products to meet. The temperature, usually at the gun, at the tip of the gun, the product is coming out anywhere as little as 100 degrees Fahrenheit all the way to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, that is going to speed that chemical reaction up, but most importantly after that, allow the atomization of the product onto the substrate. We're usually going to be spraying with a round pattern, although fan patterns are used for more customization. And the foam insulation is going to expand at closed cell foam 25 times under ideal conditions, and we'll explain what that means, 25 times the liquid mass that goes on. Under open cell foam, you're going to see 120 times what the liquid mass is for expansion. The final in-place product is what the client is paying for. The spray rig is, in essence, a mobile factory. Whereas you are buying a product, a sheet product, a rigid styrofoam, whatever, you're going to the store, the building materials supply center, all of their products have been manufactured at the manufacturing facility. Those products are then certified and tested and have quality control at the plant so that when you touch it and receive it at the building center, it's already a good product. The spray foam installer is taking the chemical, the A and the B, using the equipment that has been designed by the manufacturers to then install the final product that you are paying for, C, right? A, B meets with C. The equipment and the installer are critical. You got to have the right equipment to install the chemical in the first place. You have to have good working knowledge of it, all the ups and downs, all the ins and outs. This doesn't take just a weekend to learn. This is where the dangers come into play with installing the final product. However, it is the advantage of liquid applied expanding polyurethane foam that gives the huge spray foam distinction of quality and problem solving in the industry. And that's what we're going to get into, how and why this all goes together. If you want to have a good spray foam application, you need to have 4 things in order to have a high quality product in place. Those 4 things are heat and mix, heat and mix. Those are the 4 essential things to making a good in-place spray foam product. The reason that heat is so necessary, and this is the sauce that I promised that I was going to give you, is that the product cannot mix very well and very effectively when it is very thick and cold. So therefore, every step of the way, it needs to be warm. That means our drums in the trailer are warm. That means the back of the trailer itself is warm, not just the drums. That means our heaters are working correctly on the machine. That means our hose heat is working effectively to keep it warm. That means that we don't have 50 or 70 or 200 feet of hose laying out in the cold. We have it close to the building. We have it wrapped up in tarps. We have it up off of the ground. That means when we get inside the building, the basement, the metal building, whatever it happens to be, that the heat is on and that it's been on adequately for a while so that the substrate itself is warm. But when you come to pulling the trigger on the gun, you want to have good atomization of the product. That means the product needs to be warm. That means the product will mix when you have adequate pressure behind it. So that 1,000 or 1,500 psi of pressure is going to make nice, fine cells because the product is going to 100% efficiently mix because the viscosity is low enough to allow for proper mixing. If things are really, really thick, it's not going to mix well inside the chamber. It's going to come out of the gun in a non-atomized fashion, and as a result, you're going to have more of a jet stream look, and then you're going to have ugly looking foam that doesn't have a nice cell structure, foam that doesn't want to stick onto the substrate, it wants to pop back off. In fact, a really cold substrate can cause something we call reversion, which is where the foam has this heat inside of it, right, to make it mix and to make it atomize and to make it polymerize and start doing its expansion and foaming up. All that heat that's necessary to make a good end result product is now going into the substrate and warming the substrate up. So if you want to have a good job, you want to have a good foam installation, whether you're the end recipient and you want to make sure your guy is going to do a good job for you, or you're the spray foam guy and you've got to do a good job, start with getting everything warm. Start with having the building warm, having your truck warm, having the drums warm, right? Don't just pull the drums out of the delivery truck and they got to you and they're really, really cold. You're going to have a real tough time warming that product up through the heaters because the heaters can only put so much heat into them, right? Make sure your insulation is good. Make sure your hose heat is working. These are all things I've said. So when you have good heat, you will have a good mix. When you have good mix, you're going to have proper cell structure. Now this is where things come into being very important for everybody involved. I said earlier that the foam expands 25 times, closed cell foam expands 25 times the liquid mass, and open cell foam expands 120 times the liquid mass. All right, under ideal conditions. So that's meaning that all of the heat that is placed into the A and the B product, and then the mix when it mixes. So it's warm, sufficiently of low viscosity, and then 100% of A and 100% of B are mixing to the maximum that they're supposed to. Under that ideal condition where they're not losing any heat, the foam is going to thereby rise the maximum amount of time that the chemistry was designed to do, which is 25 times. But if you had cold product in a cold drum, or you had your settings really low on the machine, it's not going to rise 25 times the liquid mass. Or if you had all your settings perfect, the truck is perfect, trailer's perfect, but you're spraying to a really cold concrete basement wall, or you're spraying to really cold wood or cold metal, all that heat's going to get sucked out of the foam and go on into the substrate, warming the substrate up. So the amount of foam, that 25 times rise or 120 times rise in open cell, you're not going to get it. You're maybe going to get half. Maybe you're going to get 20%. Maybe you're going to get 30% less. So you've now put sufficient liquid mass to be 2 inches of foam in the sense of closed cell. But instead you got maybe an inch or an inch and a half, right? So you're taking like a 25 or a 30% hit, or as much as a 50% hit. So the problem is you've paid for the chemical to go on, but you don't have enough thickness for the end recipient. So now you've got a choice. Either pass it off as sufficient and hope they don't check, or you've got to start putting more liquid mass on. And that becomes a real issue. That's what we talk about yield, because each drum set, half pound or closed cell, they are designed to give a certain amount of footage, square footage, at a certain given rate of thickness. Again, at that 25 times expansion. This is called yield. So when you have a cold substrate, when you have cold settings, when you don't have the heat and you don't have the mix, you're not going to get the mileage out of the set. And as a result, more's got to come out of your pocket. So this is where people get really upset. And this is where they get gypped. This is where they get taken advantage of. They didn't account for this, and now they're spraying into the cold. So the fastest way to get everybody to be happy and have good results is to have a warm substrate, to have a warm air temperature inside where you're spraying, that the actual thing that you're spraying is itself warm. So warm it on up. And when you say, well, how warm? Well, try and get it as close to room temperature as you can, depending on time of year and climatic conditions and humidity levels. Obviously, you start putting heat to things, they want to drip. You know, there's a condensing point. And we've covered that on how much foam do I need to put on to stop condensation. So if you put heat on, sometimes you got to go through a drying period where you're going to thaw things out, warm things up, and then you got to get rid of the moisture. And if you do that, then you're not going to have adhesion problems. Spray foam, closed or open cell, is not going to stick to wood or metal that is damp. You know, so you've got to be really careful. This is where the adhesion issues come into play. where you put the spray foam on and then it popped right off kind of thing. So heat and mix are important. So have the heat on before the spray foam guy gets there. You spray foam guys, be telling your clients what you need. Don't just show up and then try to put the heat on. I know there's certain conditions where you have to do that because they don't have what they need, but a whole lot of planning and communication heads off compromise and upset. Like, you don't want to be driving a huge distance, get there and everything's freezing cold and then wet, and then you've got to dry it out and you've lost the day, or worse yet, you try to push through and start spraying. So to the spray foam guys, have your client getting these things done, but also you do what's in your power. You know, you have your truck and your trailer warmed up, your chemical warmed up, have your hoses in good condition, have everything in good working condition, have your gun in good working condition. If there's something that is constantly cutting in and cutting out, get it fixed. Take care of your system so that when it's time to go to work, you're not going to be fighting the equipment with intermittent problems. You'd be surprised how many times people have emailed me, and I can't always respond to all the emails that I get, so sometimes I do, sometimes I can't. But I mean, how many times people have talked about, well, the guy was fine when he started over here, and then he seemed to be having problems with the gun or something, and it wasn't spraying right, and it didn't look right, and didn't look good. You know, I mean, a lot of these times, it's coming down to that heat and mix issue. Something's gone wrong, something's gone off in the settings, or they're having intermittent contact. So this isn't a discussion on troubleshooting. This is a discussion on the overall what is necessary to put the foam on, and you've got to have warm, even substrates. I had a situation once where the building that we were in was just barely above freezing, and we had quite a bit of hose out on the ground, and it snaked through the garage and then into the house, and you know, we were fighting it. You know, we got things warm enough to spray, but not necessarily warm enough where we were getting a really nice atomized pattern, and as a result, the foam was going on a lot more lumpy and bumpy, and then you can't control your thickness as well, and you're putting on too much and too little over here and over there. And the client came to me and he said, you know, this is what I was really expecting. You know, I was expecting something better from you guys. And I said, well, you remember when we discussed, you know, having heat on, and you said no problem, you were going to have heat on? Well, the building's quite cool, and we need more heat. And, you know, the furnace down in the basement just isn't cutting it. So, you know, beware the clients that always promise that they're going to do all of these things for you, but then when you get there, it's nothing that you described. So you've got to be thorough, you've got to be efficient, you've got to be well descriptive and communicate well what your needs are, and heat and mix is important for getting good quality spray foam insulation on the wall, on the roof, on foundation, on whatever you're spraying. Comes out of the gun in a well atomized form, then you're going to have even and consistent coverage. You're not going to have lumpy bumpy. It's going to stick, stay stuck, and it's going to be of the proper density, and then you won't be putting on a whole bunch of foam for free or coming to back charge the client. As I start to wrap up, I guess it should be stated the obvious that spray foam open cell or closed cell is a spray foam. It's not a pour foam. So we're not injecting it into walls, we're not injecting it into cavities. It is designed to mix at the gun head and then come out under pressure, atomized, and then spray and rise and set in seconds. And it doesn't stay liquid for very long. So when you encounter limitations such as a boxed header or something, it can be difficult to get foam into tight spaces at times because you need adequate room to have the spray foam leave the gun, open up on the pattern, and then detail and place the foam where you want it to go. Obviously, open cell foam stays liquid a lot longer. The rise time and the rapid high expansion of 120 times the liquid mass permits us to get into tight and difficult spots, corners and blind areas where the otherwise using of closed cell would be wrong because we can't place it and detail it where we want to go. It's not sort of an overfilled product, the closed cell foam. So this negates a lot of situations where we can just drill holes and inject the foam into spaces. We'll get into more details in part 4 of how would we do a wall, how would we do a roof, why would we do it this way, why should we watch out for these things or those things, how should we answer certain obvious or fundamental questions so that you have a correct knowledge and understanding moving into things. But in this video, I want you to understand that it is liquid applied, foam insulation taking a negative of the space, that the foam is mixing at the gun head. It's being delivered in separate lines of separate product from the gun all the way up to the gun head, that the product needs to be warm so that it can mix adequately under adequate pressure, so that it can properly atomize and have a nice detailed spray pattern so that you can get adequately controlled and placed foam into where you want it to go. That the substrate should be warm, that the substrate should be dry, that it should be free of dust and dirt and grease. And what conditions would you expect to be in if you were going to paint something? Those are the conditions that you should be in with spray foam. We'll get into a little bit more when primers are used and certain things like that, and different building materials. What can we stick to, what can we not? And I've got a specific video that it's entitled, What Can We Spray Foam To, and What Conditions Do We Need? So if you don't want to wait for video 4, you can go ahead and search that out in the library right now. However, understanding that this is a premier product and it takes years for a certified installer to understand his equipment, understand the chemistry of what's going on, fine-tune it. It's much the same as playing an instrument. Yes, you can get and learn some guitar very quickly on the internet, but you're not going to have the depth of knowledge that a veteran player, somebody who's sophisticated and well-versed in what they're doing and why. That's where apprenticeship comes in, where the spray foam installers should be apprenticing so that they can understand their craft extremely well, how to change when the conditions change, such as a high humidity day, low temperature day, high temperature day, windy days, can't get the truck backed in close. You're going to have to be dealing with a lot more hose out than you want to. The sun's beating down on one part of the building, the other part of the building is in shade. Where do you start at first? Up, down, difficult stuff, off of scaffolding, off of an equipment or a personnel lift or what have you. These are all considerations of how do we get to where we physically need to be. And I mean, we spend upwards of 1 year training somebody on the idiosyncrasies of spraying the foam, understanding the settings, changing with the conditions, and then after year 1, we spend the next year of their career with us on understanding the details of the job, because now that you're not fighting to know how to make good foam and to know when it's sticking and how it's to be sprayed, now the next thing that you do is, all right, where do I need to be placing the foam? Because you're not being hired to do the easy areas, as I was once told. You're being hired to do the difficult spots that they can't do with conventional products, or conventional products are going to be compromised in doing so. So we're going to get into that in video 4. We're going to get into details and put in closed cell and open cell and when we want to switch things up and how things want to go. This is a long enough video as it is, and we'll drop it off here. So leave your comments. I want to hear what you have to say and questions that you have. And thanks for tuning in to part 3 and 4 and 5 of this series. And we'll catch you on the next one coming up real soon.